So imagine 38 years ago, I was an under student. I was doing undergraduate. I just came from Spain 5 years before. 2 years I spent in the yeshiva in Gates at Sunderland. And there they don't learn English, nothing. I knew nothing. And I just came from Spain. I was 17 years old. I had to learn a language. And for 2 years I didn't do anything. So I went to Montefiore College, to remember. It was a high school. And there I learned, I did my O levels, my A levels. And then we went to Jews College. And Jews College is like a branch of London University. It's like Yeshiva University. It's Judaic studies and rabbinic studies. And there I was sitting in a class, and all of a sudden, Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, the principal, he walks in with a young man, and he says, okay, guys, you're going to have philosophy. Philosophy looked a bit puzzled. I said, yeah, okay. So there, this young man, he comes there, and he writes in the board. I still remember that word, epistemology. And I was scratching my head. I said, what is that? Epistemology. Usually, you know, when you have big words in English, usually they have a counter in Spanish. International, it's internacional, well, a whole bunch of words. I mean, we don't have to tell you. In Granada, there is a very big river that goes through Granada. It's called, in Spanish, it's called Guadalquivir. And obviously you all know that that is from Arabic, Guadalquivir. You know, it's the big river. Spanish is very, very similar when it comes to international words. It's Latin. English uses Latin. But epistemology I never heard of. And all of a sudden, he says, you know, I'm going to teach philosophy, but I want you to know, philosophy is nothing else but language, how we express ourselves. And he began to talk. And for 3 months, we just sat there, completely mesmerized. We just forgot one thing. We didn't take any notes. And at the end of 3 months, it used to be Jonathan then, said, he said, well, we're going to have a test, a written test. So I walked to him and said, what do you mean a test? What is that? So you have to write a whole essay, what we discussed for the past 3 months. I said, what did you discuss? I mean, it was beautiful, it was nice, there's nothing to, what is that to write? Said, no, you have to write a test. So all of a sudden, he takes his arm, he puts it over me, and he said, you know, when I was doing my PhD and my writing, you know, I was terribly nervous, and I walked up and down, and my professors came and they told me, don't worry, you know, just write whatever you know comes to mind, it'll be okay. He thought we were like him. It was unbelievable. I failed, I can tell you. You know, we read every morning. We read every morning a Mishnah. It's about Pitum HaKetoret, how the spices were done in the Bet HaMikdash. Tanya Rabbi Natan Omer, that Rabbi Natan said, כשהוא שוחק, אומר, הדק, היטב הדק. Says that when one of the Kohanim is really hammering and crushing the spices, there is another Kohen who's telling him, hey, do it, crush it properly, well, go on, do it again and again. And the question is, well, Kohanim usually is Rizimhem. Kohanim are very, very careful. And they always did their melacha, their work, in perfect condition, all the time. So what was the purpose of another Kohen telling him, crush it well, crush it properly? Says the Mishnah, מפני שהכל יפה לבשמים. Because the voice, the sound, the energy of a voice, when you speak nice, it has an effect on the spices. We say it every day, we don't pay attention. We had an unbelievable weekend. A weekend that I don't think we will ever forget. Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs spoke to us, and his words were unbelievable. Everybody is enamored with the way he expresses himself, the clarity, crystal clear message that it's not only for us, it's for the world to listen. And he's right. Joe Vallas was right. You should be our ambassador to the world, to the Jews, to represent the Jewish world all over the world. And it is with the greatest of pleasure that we introduce you to Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs.
Rabbanim, the greatest pleasure in life is to see your Talmidim go on to greatness. And Rabbi Ben Zaken has gone on to greatness, and I am thrilled, Kvod Harav, with what you have achieved here, and what Be'ezrat Hashem you are shortly about to achieve with your wonderful new school project. And there's something very special about Rabbi Ben Zaken going on to greatness, because we say on Motzei Shabbat, Kol Makom She'ata Motzei Gedulato Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Sham Ata Motzei Anu V'Tanuta. Where you find HaKadosh Baruch Hu's greatness, there you find his humility. Rabbi Ben Zaken has achieved great things, but always with humility. And I could hear that humility just now, Rabbi Ben Zaken. So please don't let me disillusion you, but you didn't fail. You passed very well indeed. And we wish you continued success in all you do. And the whole of this Jewish community here in Los Angeles is lifted by your presence. Friends, may I say thank you to Kvod Rabbanim, Rabbi Elias and Rabbi Moses, and this wonderful, wonderful community. I've just witnessed, Elena and I have just witnessed a miracle that is as hard as the division of the Red Sea. And that is the unification of two communities. To get two Jews to daven together, I mean, two Ashkenazim and Sephardim not to daven together, this is a mitzvah at least as great as Kriyas Yam Suf, because normally it goes the other way around. Somebody has a row with somebody else in shul, they storm off, they build another shul. And so you get the unusual thing that I call shul arithmetic, that shuls manage multiplication by division. And actually it's a really, really lovely thing to see these two communities davening together in tremendous harmony, and that is surely due to the two Rabbanim and their chaim and the graciousness with which they make space for one another. And I congratulate you on it, I really do. The alternative is all too easy. You know, Elaine and I travel the world, and we were in South Africa a few years ago. Somebody said, you must go and see a part of South Africa. It's called the wilderness. Have you come across this? It's a lovely bit of South Africa. We went to the wilderness. And I suddenly said, if that's what the wilderness is like, no wonder Moshe and the Bnei Yisrael spent 40 years there. It was a lovely place. But it is a bit isolated. And in the heart of the wilderness, there's a little town called Oudtshoorn. And you can't get further away from anywhere else but this little village. However, Yidden came to this village. You know why? Between 1880 and about 1910, Oudtshoorn was the world center of the ostrich trade. Now, why does anyone trade ostriches? Answer, because in those days, ostrich feathers were a wonderful thing that ladies used to wear in hats. until 1910, when, you know, there were enough automobiles around, and if you're driving in a car and you've got a big feather in your hat, it blows away. So that was the end of the ostrich industry. But for 30 years, it was the world center. So Jews in Lithuania heard about this little town in the middle of nowhere called Otzorn, said it's good panosa, so Jews moved, a few Jews moved to Otzorn, and they ran the ostrich industry. It's a very odd thing for Jews to do, but they did. Now just figure, all the Jews there were from Lithuania. They were all Litvaks. And they're in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by some non-Jews and a lot of ostriches. And we go there, and, you know, we went there to see the ostriches. But we find ourselves looking at a shul. You know, I mean, find a shul in the middle of nowhere, no Jews, nothing around. And then they take us into the local museum. And what do we find? The interior of another shul. And I'm looking at the plaques on both shuls. And we suddenly realize that Yidden in the middle of nowhere, it took them 3 years to separate into two communities. That's how long it took. You know, they'd hardly finished the induction of the first one when they're building the second one. And we're reading all the history, and we're trying to work out what happened. And it seems quite clear. I think I was right. I tried this out and some people who knew of it said, you got it right. What happened is that the Jews in Otzorn came from two places in Lithuania. One was called Kelm, one was called Shalom. So I said to her, like, I know what happened. I don't need anyone to tell me. The Kelmers thought the Shalomers were completely assimilated. The Shalomers thought the Kelmers were religious fanatics. And within 3 years in the middle of nowhere, two shuls. So when I see Ashkenazim and Sephardim coming together to make one shul, that is a miracle of Achdus, which I hope becomes contagious. So, friends, let me just share with you, time is short. Vayishma Yisro Chosen Moshe Kohen Midian Achotem Moshe. Rashi asks at the beginning of this coming week's parasha, Mashmu Shama Uva. What did Yisro hear that made him leave home, leave Midian, and say to himself, I can't stay away from this. This is something that moves me, literally and emotionally. And Rashi says, Mashmu Shama Uva, Kriyas Yamsuf, Milchemes Amalek. Division of the Red Sea and the battle against Amalek. The division of the Red Sea, I understand. Somebody hears like this, about this, never happened before, never happened again, a unique event in history that sea parts and becomes dry land. I can understand that. Anyone who hears about this wants to know more. But Milchemes Amalek, a battle against Amalek, people are always fighting battles against one another. There's nothing new in that, there's nothing special in it, there's nothing miraculous in it. Why did that move Yisro to come? And the answer is quite simple. Yes, nations fight. But here was a nation everyone knew about. Nation of slaves liberated by Kadosh Baruch Hu. The supreme power enters history to liberate the powerless. And he does miracles for them. And Kriyas Yamsuf, Oz Nifalu, Alavei Edom, Elei Moav, Yechezem, the whole world knew about it and they were terrified, and yet still Amalek attacks Israel. After all the suffering Israel went through and all the miracles of their liberation, still Amalek fights Israel. That never happened, that doesn't happen. You don't do something like that to a people who have suffered so much, to a people who have triumphed so much, to a people who obviously have something unique, something divine about them. A people that can be attacked even after all this. This is extreme. This is extreme. And friends, we're living through exactly the same, all over again, 33 centuries later. Kriyas Yamsuf, the miracle of a people scattered around the world coming together. The miracle of a people coming together to build a land and a country and a sovereignty and a state. These are miracles. Never happened before. I mentioned it last night. I won't bore anyone by repeating it. The miracles that accompanied the state of Israel have no parallel in any other nation in modern times. And all the suffering, 1948, 1967, 1973, and everyone knew and knows that you attack Israel, you will suffer. Hate destroys the hater, not the hated. And yet still, what unites the Middle East while they're fighting and killing one another in Egypt and in Syria? They all hate Israel. Sinah, that hatred is uniting them and leading them to destroy themselves, not to destroy Israel. And it is extraordinary that after all the miracles of Jewish history in modern times, all the suffering and all the triumph, still Amalek fights Israel. This is something extraordinary. There's something not natural about it. What is that something not natural about it? It is quite simply that Am Yisrael was the people charged with the responsibility, the burden and the privilege of showing the world that what the world thinks is a law of nature is not necessarily true. What is that law? As the Athenians, Herodotus, the Greek historian, tells us that the Athenians said to the Melians, whom they defeated, the strong do as they wish and the weak do as they must. That right is subordinate to might. That if you're strong, you can do what you like. And along come B'nai Yisrael, Am Hashem, God's witnesses in the world, that Em Edainu Hashem, and saying, no, right is sovereign over might. That there is justice in this world, not just military strength and numerical and demographic strength. That with right on its side, even a tiny people can achieve miracles, and without right on its side, even vast nations can do nothing. And that is the law that we were charged with teaching the world. And that is the law that upsets every nation that ever really reflected on it. And that is why the world needs us, and why the world needs Medinat Yisrael. Without Medinat Yisrael, what hope would there be for any small, weak, resourceless country in the world? It would seem to be a world dominated by superpowers. But Israel, this small country with a small population and a tiny geography, you know, Isaiah Berlin said about the Serbs, they have geography but no history. And we have history, but very little geography. And nonetheless, despite the fact that we have so little geography and so little strength, 1/4% of the landmass of the Arab world, that is Israel. And despite the fact that we have a tiny population, nonetheless, because we believe in right and justice and compassion and the sanctity of life, the weak become the strong. And Amalek finds that deeply frustrating. And that is why at the end of yesterday's parasha we said, that is something that just happens in every generation. And we face Melchemet Amalek all over again. But what gives us the absolute confidence that Israel will win and will always win is that Israel knows that the things that have happened to its history tell us Israel is the people who within itself points to something beyond itself. No people on its own could have achieved what the Jewish people has done. That is why When people look at Jews, they look at something bigger than Jews. We are the window through which the divine radiance shines out on the world. And because of that, we know that we will sing Az Yoshir till the end of time. We know we cannot fail. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has put that song in our mouth and put that unity of vision in our hearts. And we can honestly say, we who have lived to see the Jewish people return to its land, rebuild Yerushalayim, rebuild the shattered worlds of Torah, we can say, Ra'ata shifcha al hayam ma shelo ra'a Yechezkel ben Buzi. Even the smallest of us have seen what the greatest of the prophets could only see in a vision, could only imagine. We have seen with our eyes. So, Milchemet HaMalek continues, but Kriyat Yam Suf continues. The miracles of Jewish history are about to continue and are about to enlighten the world and give it hope in the face of humanity. Friends, thank you once again for what has been for Elena and myself a really memorable and thrilling weekend. May Hashem continue to bless you. And may His presence live in all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Lawrence, Jonathan Sachs. We're inviting everybody into a continental breakfast. Please join us in the social hall. Thank you.